What makes a decorated Navy SEAL freeze in terror at a crowded military bar? 2 words. 2 simple words spoken by a woman in scrubs who looked like she'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the ER. Viper. 1. The name that ended careers and started legends. The sound of beer splashing across worn denim made everyone in the anchor point bar turn their heads. Oops, my bad. Sweetheart. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, Navy SEAL with arms the size of most people's thighs, smirked as he looked down at the woman sitting alone. Golden beer soaked through her jacket, dripping onto the bar stool below. Jessica Walker, 35. Light brown hair in a messy bun, green eyes striking against freckled fair skin, slowly set her phone down. She regarded the beer stain on her gray scrubs with the weary expression of someone who just finished a brutal 12-hour shift at Coronado Medical Center. This ain't a place for civilians. Baby. Rodriguez leaned in, breath heavy with whiskey. Anchor Point is for real warriors. You should head home. His 4 SEAL teammates erupted in laughter. The entire bar, over 50 military personnel and veterans, turned to watch. Cell phones slid out, screens lighting up in anticipation of something going viral. Jessica quietly pulled napkins from the dispenser, blotting the beer with slow, methodical movements, like dressing a wound in the ER. Rodriguez laughed louder, mistaking her silence for fear. Hey, I'm talking to you. His massive hand clamped down on Jessica's wrist. Later, when reviewing the viral videos, Rodriguez would pinpoint this as the exact moment he'd made the biggest mistake of his military career, when his fingers touched skin marked by a faint circular scar that looked suspiciously like an old bullet wound. Hey folks, if this story of a hidden warrior walking among us already has you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. What happens when this nurse reveals her true identity will remind you that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Your support helps me bring you more incredible stories like this. Now let's dive into that San Diego bar where everything changed. What followed next would become the most watched military bar incident in internet history. Rodriguez found himself face down on the bar, arm twisted behind his back in a textbook restraint hold. The entire establishment fell silent. No one had seen Jessica move. Master Chief Daniel Fletcher, sitting in the corner nursing his 3rd whiskey, set his glass down with a sharp click. 25 years in special operations had taught him to recognize certain things. The way she'd transitioned from seated to standing. The precise angle of the arm lock. The weight distribution keeping a man twice her size immobilized. These weren't self-defense class moves. This was muscle memory drilled through thousands of repetitions where failure meant death. Let him go. Captain Sarah Hayes, the lone female Navy officer in Rodriguez's group, stepped forward, blonde hair in a regulation bun, posture radiating authority. You just assaulted a United States Navy SEAL. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you're in? Jessica released Rodriguez and sat back down as if nothing had happened. She picked up her phone, glanced at it, then set it aside. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate. Someone conserving energy for a long shift ahead. Rodriguez pushed himself up, face flushed with embarrassment and rage, rubbing his wrist where her grip had left marks. Lucky shot, he muttered, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Through BUD-S and advanced operator courses, he'd never been taken down that quickly or cleanly. "A water, please," Jessica said to the bartender, her voice carrying a slight Midwest accent. Jake Martinez, former Army Ranger, sleeves of military tattoos, studied Jessica with new interest as he filled a glass. 3 years at Anchor Point, he'd seen every kind of confrontation imaginable. But this was different. The woman requesting water instead of beer. The way her eyes had already cataloged every exit, every potential weapon, every threat. These were habits that couldn't be taught in weekend seminars. That was military Krav Maga. Tommy Sullivan, grizzled veteran in his 50s, faded army jacket, swayed as he stood. His eyes, though glazed with alcohol, held sharpness suggesting he'd seen nightmares. Not the watered-down gym version. "Lucky grab," Victor Dmitri called out. The private military contractor was built like a refrigerator, 250 pounds earned in conflict zones. His thick Eastern European accent colored his amusement. Little Nurse probably watched YouTube. The word nurse rippled through the crowd. Someone had recognized her from Coronado Medical Center. The narrative formed quickly. A tired healthcare worker had gotten lucky against an elite operator. The crowd's tension eased, replaced by anticipation preceding every bar fight in military towns. The challenge. "You got lucky," Rodriguez said, voice carrying through the bar, confidence returning. "But luck runs out. How about we settle this properly? Arm wrestling. Right here, right now," his teammates cheered. This was familiar territory, pure strength where technique mattered less than raw power. Rodriguez had never lost an arm wrestling match. His biceps were the size of heads, forearms corded with muscle from years of specialized training. Jessica sipped her water. "No thank you." "Scared?" Captain Hayes interjected, voice carrying condescension reserved for civilians who didn't understand military hierarchy. "I don't blame you. Beating someone in a surprise attack is one thing. Facing them in a real contest is another." The crowd grew. Patrons abandoned pool games, forming a loose circle around the drama. Someone started a live stream. Multiple phones captured every angle. "Tell me something," Jessica said, turning to face Hayes. "Third phase of Bud-S training, week 5. What's the standard procedure for underwater knot tying when your dive buddy experiences shallow water blackout?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. It was specific, too specific, the kind of detail that didn't appear in documentaries or recruitment videos. Hayes's confident expression faltered. "How would you know about—" "Because the procedure they're teaching is wrong," Jessica continued, voice never rising above conversational level. "The recovery position they mandate increases the risk of secondary drowning by 30%. Any special operations medic who's actually dealt with blackout scenarios in combat diving operations would know that." Jake had stopped polishing glasses. His hands rested on the bar, recognizing the precision in her words. This wasn't internet research. This was operational experience. The weapons test. "Prove it," Jake said, pulling a Glock 19 from beneath the bar, unloaded, used for concealed carry classes. "You talk like you know weapons. How fast can you field strip this?" Jessica glanced at the weapon. 17 seconds with proper tools. 23 without, 23 seconds, Jake scoffed. The range record here is 32 seconds set by a SEAL Team 6 operator. He slid the weapon across the bar. "Show me." Jessica picked up the Glock with her left hand, right still holding the water glass. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media, analyzed frame by weapons experts worldwide. Her movements were economical, precise, almost boring in their efficiency. No flourish, no showing off, just systematic disassembly by someone who'd done it so many times that muscle memory replaced conscious thought. The slide came off. The barrel lifted free. The recoil spring assembly separated. Each component placed on the bar in a perfect line, oriented exactly as military armorers were trained to arrange them. 4 seconds. With one hand, Jake announced, voice carrying disbelief and respect. The bar went completely silent except for classic rock playing softly through the speakers. Even pool players had stopped mid-game, Rodriguez stood frozen, his arm-wrestling challenge forgotten in the face of a display suggesting depths he hadn't considered. The confrontation escalates. "You smell like death," Tommy announced, weaving closer, bloodshot eyes fixed on Jessica with intensity, recognizing a kindred spirit in darkness. Not hospital death. The other kind. The kind that clings to you in places where the Geneva Convention is toilet paper. "That's enough," Dmitri declared, standing. His massive frame cast shadows as he approached. Smart-mouth nurse needs lesson in respect. The tension ratcheted up. Marcus the bouncer moved his hand closer to the baseball bat. Elena half rose from her seat, but Jessica remained perfectly still. Only the slight adjustment of her feet beneath the stool suggested she was even paying attention. When Dmitri moved, it was with confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight that mattered. His grab was textbook PMC, direct, brutal, designed to establish immediate physical dominance. His hand reached for Jessica's shoulder. The next 4 seconds would be discussed in combat forms for years. Jessica didn't block the grab. Instead, she moved with it, using Dimitri's momentum against him. Her body rotated, weight shifted, and suddenly the massive contractor found himself off balance. A foot swept his ankle. An elbow found his solar plexus with surgical precision. His diaphragm spasmed, cutting off oxygen. By the time his brain processed what was happening, he was on the floor, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Jessica hadn't stood up. She was still seated, water glass in hand, as if the entire sequence had been nothing more than swatting a fly. But those watching closely, and cameras caught everything, saw details telling a different story. The way her feet had repositioned, the micro-adjustments in posture, the fact she'd struck 3 specific pressure points in a sequence speaking of advanced close-quarters combat training. "Who taught you that?" The voice came from the entrance where Colonel David Brooks had just entered. He was old-school military, the kind who'd earned his rank in places the news never reported on. His eyes fixed on Jessica with intensity of a predator recognizing another predator. Jessica turned slowly to face him. For the first time since the encounter began, something shifted in her expression. Not fear, not concern, but weariness, suggesting she'd hoped to avoid this moment. The colonel stepped closer, his aide flanking him. Bar patrons parted like the Red Sea. This was Colonel David Brooks, commander of Naval Special Warfare Group 1, the man who decided which SEALs got the missions that mattered. In the corner, Master Chief Fletcher was already on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. His weathered face had gone pale. He'd recognized something in that 4-second sequence, something connecting to briefings in rooms where recording devices were forbidden, and names were never used. Rodriguez found his courage again, bolstered by senior command presence. He moved to stand with his teammates, forming a loose semicircle, effectively trapping Jessica between them and the bar. "Everyone who's served has a call sign," Rodriguez announced, loud enough for the entire bar to hear. His confidence was returning. "If you're who you claim to be, some kind of operator, then you'll have one. So, let's hear it. What's your call sign?" Jessica set down her water glass with deliberate care. The ice cubes clinked against the sides, the sound somehow carrying in the tense silence. She looked at Rodriguez, then at Hayes, then at the colonel. Her green eyes held something that made even these hardened warriors unconsciously shift their stances. "I don't have a call sign," she said finally. "Bullshit," Hayes interjected. "Everyone in Special Operations has a call sign. It's not optional. It's part of the culture, the identity. You're lying." The crowd murmured agreement. This was common knowledge. Call signs were as fundamental as ranks and serial numbers. They were earned through notable events, embarrassing moments, or characteristics defining an operator among their peers. To claim advanced training without a call sign was like claiming to be a surgeon without knowing what a scalpel was. Outside, through the bar's tinted windows, a black SUV screeched to a halt. The engine was still running as someone inside made a phone call that would change everything. Rodriguez pressed closer, his fellow SEALs flanking him. They had Jessica surrounded, 5 elite operators forming a human wall between her and any exit. "Last chance," Rodriguez said, voice dropping to a growl. "Tell us your call sign, or we're going to assume you're just another wannabe. And trust me, we don't take kindly to stolen valor." The atmosphere had shifted from entertainment to something more primal. This wasn't just about a confrontation. It was about identity, honor, and the sacred boundaries separating those who had served from those who merely claimed to. Jessica stood up slowly from her bar stool. At 5'6", she should have been dwarfed by the SEALs surrounding her. Instead, something in her posture, in the way she planted her feet and squared her shoulders, made her seem larger, more dangerous, like a compressed spring containing energy that could reshape the entire room if released. She looked directly at Rodriguez, her green eyes holding his with an intensity that made him want to step back. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the now silent bar. Viper 1. The effect was immediate and devastating. Rodriguez had been raising a beer bottle to his lips, a gesture of dismissive confidence. The bottle never made it. His hand froze mid-motion, muscles locking as if electrocuted. The beer slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, falling in what seemed like slow motion. The bottle hit the floor with a crash that shattered the silence. Golden liquid spread across the worn boards as the bar erupted in chaos. But Rodriguez didn't move. He stood frozen, face draining of color so quickly that Elena, with her medical training, moved instinctively closer in case he fainted. "Holy Mother of—" Master Chief Fletcher's voice cut through the shock. His phone clattered onto the table as he took an involuntary step backward. 25 years of special operations experience, missions in every conflict zone, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. The reaction rippled outward like a shockwave. Captain Hayes's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with recognition. Jake dropped the glass he'd been polishing, crystal shattering behind the bar. Even Colonel Brooks, who'd maintained composure through 20 years of combat, visibly staggered. "No," Tommy gasped from his corner, falling to his knees with the gracelessness of someone whose legs had simply stopped working. His bloodshot eyes fixed on Jessica with something approaching religious awe. "The ghost sniper. You're the ghost sniper." Dmitri, still struggling to breathe on the floor, managed to lift his head. Even through his pain, recognition was clear on his face. In the PMC community, certain names transcended normal operations. They became legends, cautionary tales, benchmarks of what was possible when skill met will in combat's crucible. "That's impossible," Brooks said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You died at Operation Blackwater. The whole unit was listed as KIA. I read the after-action report myself." Admiral James Morrison moved forward and did something that sent another shockwave through the bar. This 2-star admiral, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, dropped to one knee in front of Jessica. "Master Chief Viper," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you immediately." The bar erupted. Phones that had been recording suddenly became the most important devices in the room. Live streams expecting to capture a simple bar fight were now broadcasting something extraordinary. Comment sections exploded with disbelief, recognition, and frantic searches for information about Viper 1. Every phone in the bar was pointed at Jessica. The various angles would later be compiled into a single video racking up 50 million views in its first 48 hours. The moment when a tired emergency room nurse was revealed to be the most lethal sniper in United States Special Operations history. Rodriguez's legs finally gave out. He sank onto a bar stool, his massive frame suddenly deflated. The beer from his dropped bottle had reached his boots, but he didn't notice. His mind struggled to reconcile the woman before him with stories he'd heard in classified briefings. 127 confirmed kills, someone whispered from the crowd. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Hayes found her voice barely more than a croak. "You're the only female operator to ever complete Delta Force selection. The only woman to serve as a primary sniper for Task Force Black. Operation Blackwater," Fletcher added, voice carrying the weight of someone who'd lost friends in that desert hellhole. October 15, 2014. Classified as the single most successful failed operation in Special Operations history. Admiral Morrison stood up slowly, knees protesting. Age and rank hadn't diminished his physical presence, but the emotional weight of the moment was clear on his weathered face. He turned to address the bar, voice carrying command authority. "What you're about to hear doesn't leave this room," he began, though everyone knew that ship had sailed. Live streams were broadcasting to thousands, soon millions. Master Chief Jessica Walker, call sign Viper 1, is the most decorated female operator in United States military history. And, until 10 years ago, she didn't officially exist. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet of moments before. This was the silence of recognition, of understanding they were in the presence of something extraordinary. Jessica remained standing, posture unchanged despite the weight of every eye. The tremor in her hands from earlier had stilled. She looked exactly like what she'd pretended to be, a tired healthcare worker at shift's end. Except now, everyone could see what had been hidden in plain sight. The way she stood with perfect balance despite apparent exhaustion. The scars on her arms that weren't from medical accidents but battlefield wounds. The 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen humanity at its worst and chosen to spend her life trying to heal rather than harm. "Operation Blackwater," Morrison continued, voice heavy with the burden of command decisions haunting him a decade later. 6 operators inserted into eastern Afghanistan to extract 73 civilians, aid workers and their families, from a compound about to be overrun by Taliban forces. He paused, swallowing hard. Intel said light resistance, minimal enemy presence. His jaw tightened. Intel was wrong. It was a trap. 300 Taliban fighters, heavy weapons. The compound was surrounded before our team even landed. Every military person in the room knew what those numbers meant. 300 to 1. In military terms, it wasn't a fight. It was a death sentence. 5 of the 6 operators were killed in the first 15 minutes, Morrison said, voice cracking. Viper 1 held that compound for 16 hours, alone, against an entire Taliban battalion. She saved all 73 civilians, got them to the extraction point, provided cover while they loaded onto helicopters. He paused, eyes glistening, and she did it after watching her entire team, her family, die in front of her. The weight of those words settled over the bar like a shroud. Rodriguez looked like he might be sick. Hayes had tears running down her face. Even Dmitri, finally breathing normally, had propped himself against a table, his expression one of profound respect. Rashid, Jessica spoke for the first time since revealing her call sign. The name carried weight, memory, pain compressed into 2 syllables. 8 years old. His sister Amira was 6. They were in the last group to evacuate. Amira had been shot in the leg. Rashid wouldn't leave her. She paused, green eyes focusing on something beyond the walls of the bar, beyond the present moment. I carried them both. 200 meters of open ground. Every Taliban fighter in that valley was shooting at us. Rashid kept saying, "I'll be brave, miss. I'll be brave like you." He was 8 years old, trying to comfort me while bullets struck all around us. Elena, who'd seen Jessica save countless lives in the ER, finally understood where that supernatural calm came from. It wasn't training or experience. It was the peace that came from having already faced the worst humanity could offer and choosing to keep going anyway. Jessica's phone rang, cutting through the moment like a blade. She pulled it from her pocket, not a normal smartphone, but one with modifications suggesting capabilities beyond civilian specifications. She looked at the caller ID, and for the second time that evening, her composure cracked. She answered on the second ring. Blackjack. The voice on the other end was audible only to her, but whatever was being said drained what little color remained in her face. "When?" Jessica asked, voice steady despite the tremor that had returned to her hands. She listened, jaw tightening with each word. "How many?" A pause. Understood. "Send me the intel package." She ended the call and stood there for a moment, phone hanging loose in her hand. The bar waited, sensing that something fundamental had shifted yet again. "That was Langley," Morrison said. It wasn't a question. Jessica nodded slowly. "Rashid, the boy from Blackwater. He's 18 now. Been running a school for girls in Kabul with his sister. The Taliban grabbed him 3 days ago. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The child, whose life Jessica had saved at the cost of everything she was now needed saving again. They want him as leverage," Jessica continued, voice gaining strength. "He's become a symbol. The boy who survived Blackwater, who grew up to build schools where the Taliban burned them. They're going to execute him publicly in 72 hours. Unless," Morrison began. "Unless Viper 1 comes back from the dead," Jessica finished. The transformation of the Anchor Point bar from confrontation scene to impromptu operations center was remarkable. Rodriguez found his voice, hoarse. "What do you need?" The question represented a fundamental shift. These weren't antagonists anymore. They were potential allies, drawn together by recognition of something greater than ego or pride. "You've got 12 operators ready to roll," Master Chief Fletcher said. "Phone already out. All volunteers, all Tier 1 experience. Transportation's being arranged. Equipment's being sourced. Admiral Morrison's handling the diplomatic side. Colonel Brooks is running interference with the Pentagon." Jessica closed her eyes, feeling something she hadn't experienced in a decade, the weight of not being alone. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because Viper 1 saved 73 lives when everyone said it was impossible," Fletcher replied. "Because Master Chief Walker showed us tonight that some people are worth believing in. Because Rashid was 8 years old and tried to be brave for you, and now it's our turn to be brave for him." Rodriguez stepped forward. Earlier arrogance transformed into determined purpose. "I'm in. We owe you. I owe you. For tonight. For Blackwater. For every life you saved while we strutted around bars acting like we're God's gift to warfare." Hayes moved beside him. "Whatever you need, Master Chief." One by one, operators stepped forward. SEALs, Rangers, even the grizzled contractor Dimitri, back on his feet. Jessica looked around the room, seeing faces watching her, SEALs who moments ago had tried to humiliate her, a contractor who'd tried to physically dominate her, officers who'd questioned her very existence. And in every face she saw the same thing, understanding that some fights transcended personal grievances. 3 days later, a nondescript cargo plane touched down at Bagram Airfield under cover of darkness. Officially, it didn't exist. Jessica stepped off the ramp, and for a moment the decade fell away. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with desert dust, the distant sound of rotor blades, the weight of tactical gear settling across her shoulders like an old friend she'd hoped never to meet again. Viper 1. "Welcome back to the sandbox," Fletcher said, materializing from the shadows beside a line of vehicles. Behind him stood 11 more figures, Rodriguez, Hayes, and 9 others who'd answered the call, not as active duty personnel but as private citizens taking a very dangerous vacation. The mission would be impossible, the odds insurmountable, the consequences severe if discovered. But somewhere in an Afghan compound, an 18-year-old boy who'd once been carried to safety by a woman who refused to let him die was waiting, hoping, believing that miracles could happen twice. And walking across that tarmac, surrounded by warriors who'd become believers in her legend, Jessica Walker, Master Chief, Viper 1, the ghost sniper of Blackwater, was about to prove him right, because some promises were worth keeping, some debts were worth paying, and some fights were worth fighting, even when the world said they were already lost.